It's almost beautiful. Now this is job growth to date. The latest data we have is through July. There's about a 1 month lag. I'll get August on Friday, and you can see that this graph takes off where the other one left off. 2005, both sides of the bay job growth went positive. Although this time the run-up was not very long. The dark line is the East Bay. Its job growth peaked at 2007, and it was going down all 2007. Job growth on this side of the bay went negative in January of 08. Job growth on this side of the bay was negative all 2008. Now, why didn't rents go down here at that time? San Francisco. Look at San Francisco. It was chugging along. San Francisco's job growth didn't go negative or didn't go south until April of 2008. San Francisco job growth didn't go negative until October of 08, last year. I got the data in November because of the lag. Thanksgiving, I wrote an article. It's out here in the Rental Housing Magazine, published in January, where I stated that 2008 would be the year that rents peaked. And sure enough, this is real facts. They survey larger apartment buildings, and rents peaked in the third quarter of 08. Okay? So I've proven that we can predict what rents are going to do because of job growth. And if job growth drives rent growth, jobs drive rents, and rents drive apartment values, I should be able to predict then the bottom of the apartment market. And that's what I'm saying I'm going to be doing by this very graph. But what I'm going to say is that the bottom of the apartment market is going to occur when this here starts to probably look like this. It's going to bottom out and it's going to start swinging up again. Okay? So when both of those lines start to go north, to me, that is the green line, that is the bottom of the apartment market, and that's the time to buy. Now, does that mean that rents are going to be going up then at the same time? No, not necessarily, because remember the last time this happened, it took 3 years from the time rents started going down to the time when they started going back up. But what it does mean, is that the period of maximum pain for landlords here will have been passed. Owners will know that the worst is over and rent increases will be coming. Okay? And this here was a V-shaped recovery in employment, and you've heard that we probably won't necessarily be getting that. It might look like this. And here's your classic double dip, which we had then, and that's what we hope we don't get this time around. I want to give you a few reasons why I think that when the rental market picks up, it's going to pick up with a vengeance, okay? First of all, there have been a ton of unsold condos that have been put on the rental market. They're rentals. So a lot of foreclosed houses were rented. As the housing market picks up, as the 1 to 4 market picks up, those owners are going to flip those to owner occupants. And those units will no longer be part of the rental supply. There's not very much being constructed as far as apartments. Many of you may have seen in the Wall Street Journal an article recently The New American Dream, renting. Now, is that music to our ears or what? I think there are generations of folks that maybe have gotten burned by owning houses that are no longer going to be wanting to touch houses at all. They're renters. The other thing is, it's not as easy for tenants to buy houses these days. I don't see my tenants going out in droves to buy houses, although it's pretty easy. I mean, you have to have good credit, you have to have money, but I don't see a drove, okay? And lastly, you may have seen a recent article by the Association of Bay Area Governments that said in particular Oakland, just as an example, would increase in population 140,000 over the next 25 years. So can't you see what's going to happen? it could explode. And you know what? It could be happening right now. And when it happens, it could happen like that. Now, I have to talk about inflation. I just have to. Majority of U.S. recessions were led into and out of by real estate. I don't think this one's much different. The subprime debacle led us into it, and we know what's happening with the single-family market right now. It's starting to lead us out. No different. But it didn't look like that always. Last February, March, I think it looked rather bleak, and I think the fellows in Washington knew this all too well, that if they wanted to get some action, maybe if they wanted to get some re-election, they had to get the real estate market going. And so what did they do? In March, they announced that they would print $1 trillion or more, what they call quantitative easing. They didn't print $1 trillion bills. They pushed a button and bingo, it appeared. And they would use that money to buy U.S. Treasury bonds, to prop up the value of the bonds so they keep the interest rates low. And they also bought treasuries, mortgage-backed securities. So all the bankers that made the loans to all these people buying houses, they knew that those would be bundled up in securities, run through the various agencies, and ultimately bought by the Fed. And that money would be recycled. And the Treasury even got into the act. They said, okay, first-time home buyers, we'll give you $8,000 towards your closing costs in the form of tax credit. So it looks like it worked. Things are happening. Now, a year ago, in the middle of the Lehman Brothers and the whole credit crisis, the Federal Reserve panicked probably, and they flooded the banking system with cash. So that banks had enough cash for runs on the bank, and so that they had massive reserves at the Federal Reserve. This is a graph that my son did. Ryan, who's back east, he graphed the growth, the money growth of M0, the money supply, just the cash in the system. Look at that spike. And it's still there. It hasn't gone out. Now, I'm not an economist, and I'm not going to attempt to tell you what that is, but I do have an economist who had a great quote, and if you don't mind, I'm just going to read it. This is from Art Laffer, who's a private economist, but many of you knew him from the Reagan years, famous for the Laffer curve. Now, he said, the percentage increase in the monetary base is the largest increase in the past 50 years, by a factor of 10. It is so far outside the realm of our prior experiential base that historical comparisons are rendered difficult, if not meaningless. Bank reserves are crucially important because they are the foundation upon which banks are able to expand their liabilities and thereby increase the quantity of money. Banks now have huge amounts of excess reserves held at the Fed, enabling them to make lots of net new loans. It's difficult to estimate the magnitude of the inflationary and interest rate consequences of the Fed's actions, because frankly, we have not ever seen anything like this in the United States. To date, what's happened is potentially far more inflationary than were the monetary policies of the late 1970s, when the prime interest rate peaked at 21.5% and inflation peaked in the low double digits. Many of you know Milton Friedman. He defined inflation as always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon, in the sense that it cannot occur without a more rapid increase in the quantity of money than an output. They even have an equation for inflation. M times V equals P times Q. Now, I was never really great at math, but algebra was okay. At least I understand